he had too much mercury in his disposition.
Sacred music, he goes into overdrive. Everyone that I know has said that his sacred music is the most beautiful of all. The important thing about the sacred music is that it comes from a priest. You get a spiritual depth that you don't get really with other composers, however great Bach, Mozart were. Vivaldi has that something that they don't have.
Antonio Vivaldi created an environment of insistent and unrelenting sound for the expression of extravagant and violent feeling. His most famous work, The Seasons, is intensely expressive. It was a way of translating a pictorial and operatic genre into music. There is, in fact, in his art, a thoroughly Venetian tendency to combine display with melody, so that he introduces operatic effects within his instrumental music and sustains his operas with the techniques of his concerti. The first page of the solo violin part of the Spring Concerto resembles a composition by Mondrian. The notes seem to dance together. They arch and leap and soar in serried ranks. On his scores, Vivaldi will scrawl down hurriedly spiritoso or allegro. Sometimes he will continue the notation for 3 or 4 pages, then pause, then cross it all out, then with the same vigour and rapidity begin all over again from the first notes. On occasions he would write out 2 movements for the same place and then leave it to the musicians to make their preference. He worked sometimes so quickly that he forgot his original key. His writing became more abrupt and elliptical in the course of composition.
The general trademark of Vivaldi, which applies to all his music, is texture. You can look at Vivaldi and you can say his music's quite simple compared with that of, shall we say, Handel or Bach. But when you look more closely, you realise it was part of a whole musical scene, and in the terms of the sacred music, it was part of a music for worship, really. What I try to say to people performing Vivaldi's sacred music is this was a form of prayer.
We may consider the nature of music as an expression of political life. Thus we may say that humankind comes into the world to maintain and to celebrate the structure into which it is born. The people of Venice were like bees, singing in their hives of gold. There is a joy in formal order and display. There is a joy in the endless echoes and repetitions, so much like the governance of Venice. There is deep solace to be found in the experience of harmony, where is heard the voice of tens of thousands rather than that of one. the music of St. Mark's was under the direct control of the state procurators, an expression of the evident fact that Roman Catholicism had been transformed into a state church. There was, or was supposed to be, a profound concord between faith and the city and the harmony of song. To put it more crudely, music became a form of political propaganda.
Vivaldi wrote such a vast amount of music, which we have only a portion of it. We have about 900 works, and that's it. There must have been more. In a sense, what I feel is it's a great privilege to be able to do what I'm doing. Every time that you look at a document, every time you find something, you're just seeing a little bit more of that person. It's a bit like that I'm allowed to be part of the family. It is so exciting also to get to know somebody of this, say, magnitude, and to know him in a way that nobody else does.
So do you think you've discovered a new Vivaldi?
Yes. What I want to do, and the only thing I want to do, is produce the truth. I'm not interested in stories. I'm not interested in theory. I'm not interested in thought. All I'm interested in is what I read in a document, and also to, should we say, bury some of the horrendous misinterpretations that have been made in so many books.
So Vivaldi's reputation will rise even higher?
I certainly hope so.
In his rapidity of execution, Vivaldi is thoroughly Venetian. He wrote more than 500 instrumental works and almost 100 operas. He boasted that he could compose a concerto with all its parts faster than a copyist could copy it. His playing, too, had the fire and energy of lightning. The German scholar Zacharias von Uffenbach, attending one of Vivaldi's concerts, noticed that he quite confounded me, for such playing has not been heard before and can never be equalled. He placed his finger but a hair's breadth from the bridge, so that there was hardly room for the bow. He played thus on all 4 strings, with imitations, and at an unbelievable speed. Uffenbach then commissioned Vivaldi to write some concerti grossi for him. 3 days later, Vivaldi delivered 10 of them. On the manuscript score of his opera, Tito Manlio, these words are scribbled: Musica del Vivaldi, fatta in 5 giorni. Music by Vivaldi, completed in 5 days.
I think he was a working composer. He wrote music for particular people, for particular events, and certainly as far as the church music was concerned, he would be working, as it were, to a commission. He would be instructed to provide so many psalm settings or so many concerti, and he'd have to sit down and work at them. And of course, we need to get away from this idea that composers are people who are divinely inspired and have a sort of muse sitting on their shoulder telling them what to do. Vivaldi was a working composer. He would have had ideas, he would have been inspired by the people he was working with, he would have been inspired by the instruments he was writing for and the sounds of them. He was obviously very, very highly attuned to the sounds of instruments.
Is it then possible to interpret the nature of Venetian music as an organic whole? It is marked by exuberance and spontaneity, a ferocious gaiety that is manifest in other forms of Venetian art. The most used and favoured word is brilliance. It has associations with the glitter of Venetian glass and the glittering light upon the water. The descriptive terms luminous, shimmering, glittering, brilliant, dazzling, sparkling, radiant all have to do with the effects of light. It may be possible to define the nature of this music as an expression of the Venetian temperament, in the spirit of Stendhal's remark that the glittering reflection of the Venetian character falls across the texture of Venetian music.
It was a city of great sort of industry and energy, rather like London today. People sort of live at a pace, and I'm sure people did live at a pace in Venice, and I'm sure Vivaldi did, because he had lots of different jobs and he would flip from one to the other. It doesn't mean to say that he was any less serious in doing his work, and it doesn't mean that the facility of the music is a sort of weak quality. I think it's the strength of Vivaldi.
In Vivaldi's manuscripts, there is evidence of a tremendous force of conception and execution, outstripping the ability of the hand to register it. There is such animation and rhythmic drive that the momentum is irresistible.
Vivaldi is one of these composers, a bit like Bach, where the more you perform the music, the more you see in it.
The coloristic effects, the vivid impressionism, the shimmering harmonies, the fantastic ingenuity of Venetian music find their acme in Vivaldi. Any imitated pattern creates excitement. Agitation creates excitement. Vivaldi is vivacity. Speed of composition and of execution is the key. The words used by his contemporaries were fierezza, fiery energy, and prestezza, or rapidity. The melodic force is overwhelming. The impression, then, is one of inexhaustibility. In the same year he was appointed official composer of the Ospedale della Pietà, Vivaldi's first opera was staged in the city of Vicenza on the mainland of the Veneto. This was a prelude to the performance of his operas in Venice itself, where he quickly earned both popularity and income. For the rest of his life, he divided his compositions between operatic and sacred work. In his operatic works, he was an entrepreneur as well as a musician. He rented the theatre, he chose the libretti, he engaged the singers and the musicians. He conducted the orchestra and then also gave solo performances on the violin. Yet this supreme impresario was also a man of the cloth. The Venetian dramatist Goldoni recorded a visit to Vivaldi. "I found him surrounded with scores," he wrote, "his breviary in his hand. He rose, made the sign of the cross with broad gestures, put his breviary down." This conflation of piety and business, of the sacred and the secular, seems so thoroughly Venetian as to need no further comment. Yet all things in Venice were dependent upon fashion. A close friend of Vivaldi, Charles de Brosse, wrote in 1740 that, to my great surprise, I found that he is not so highly regarded as he deserves to be in this country, where everything follows the trend of the moment, where his works have been heard for too long a time, and where last year's music is no longer popular. It was for this and other reasons that Vivaldi looked for patrons abroad. He travelled to Vienna and then was about to journey on to Dresden when, in 1741, at the age of 63, he died. It was reported that after a life of excessive prodigality, he died a pauper. Yet this may be the usual pious epilogue for a career of extravagant genius. The same rush of genius that is associated with Vivaldi, the same facility and prolixity, are evident through the history of Venetian culture. Tintoretto was well known for the ferocious energy of his artistic practice. He could paint the walls of a church or of a guild within a week. Vasari noted that his best paintings were executed with such speed that he had finished before others thought he had begun. In a later century, Tiepolo was known for being able to finish a large canvas in 10 hours. So in the music of Vivaldi, there is a tremendous quickness and pressure, guided by a driving force and rhythmic impulse that astonished his contemporaries. It is as inexorable as fate. It rushes forward like the tides of the lagoon. What is the secret of this exuberance in the artists of Venice? It is joy. Joy in creation. It has to do with the fact of living in an harmonious city. Yet it is also the joy of living in unity with the culture and society that surrounded them. They were at home. The ground of their being was Venice itself. There is another aspect of Venetian harmonies. The ancients deemed music to be the token of an ordered cosmos. Since Venice was the preeminent example of ordered governance in the world, it was only natural that music should emanate from it. It contained the music of the spheres. It partook both of earth and of heaven. The gates of paradise had opened in the city. All the various forms of constitution, monarchy, oligarchy, and republic were molded and mingled together. These were celestial harmonies imparted by God. Even the merchants of Venice were educated in the rules of proportion, in mercantile textbooks such as the Rule of Three, also known as the Golden Rule or the Merchant's Key. The architecture or architecture of the city was conceived harmoniously. If it is indeed true that buildings have been raised by the power of music, then the churches and noble houses of Venice have assuredly embodied the melody of the world. The architects of the day studied theories of harmony. In foreign policy, the Doge and Senate strived to maintain a balance of powers. They strove for peace, it was said, because peace reflected harmony in every sense. Just as in a sonata or concerto, no one instrument is allowed to dominate the others, so in the Venetian state, no one interest or authority was allowed to influence the rest. Everything was of a piece. No one should rise too high, no one should fall too low.